What brawlers have the best supers in Brawl Stars? Let's rank them 1 to 22. Alright, so let's rank the supers from worst to best for every brawler in Brawl Stars. But there's one really important thing for this ranking that matters a lot, is I'm not gonna factor in each brawler's star power. I don't think it would be fair if I did so, because only some star powers affect their supers, but some star powers don't. So I think it's fair to put everyone on the same playing field where there's no star powers in the equation at all. I think everyone's opinion on this is probably going to be pretty different, but this is my own. Make sure to let me know what supers you think are best or worst down below in the comments. What I think is probably also, I want to say, is just because it's ranked really low at the bottom doesn't mean it's not useful, it just means I think it's the worst. So what I think is the worst star power in Brawl Stars right now, it's going to be Piper's. Now, Piper's star power is definitely really useful in Bounty, but it's not useful in Heist, really. It's not useful in Brawl Ball, and it's just sometimes not that useful, especially if you're on, say, an iPad. It can be really awkward to super backwards, which is really the only place you want to go for the most part with Piper's super, and it can put you in uncomfortable situations too. Sometimes you can be landing in a place and someone knows where you're gonna land, and they can actually shoot at that location before you even land there, and you can't dodge it at all. So it's okay. It's definitely not bad, but I just think it's not as useful as the other supers on this list. But I think at the second worst super in Brawl Stars, it's going to be Mortis's. Now, Mortis's super is definitely useful for him, but I just don't think it has that large of an impact compared to some of these other supers in the game. It's not really a game-changing super. It's definitely useful. It can keep himself alive, a little bit of healing, a little bit of damage, but it's not that much of either. Sure, you can maybe hit multiple people sometimes, but not all the time. It has a long range. It's okay. It's definitely somewhat useful, but I just don't think it's that impactful. At 20, the third worst super in Brawl Stars, it's gonna be Bo. Bo's super definitely has its uses, and especially at the lower gameplay where people are not as used to Bo's super, it's probably even more useful. But as you get better at the game, you're gonna start being able to trip all of those mines without taking any damage. If you see Bo throw those mines, you should be able to trip most of them with no problem, even if you are a normal move speed brawler. So Bo's mines can be useful. If you don't see him throw them, then they can definitely be a problem. But if you do see him throw them, then they are almost useless. They're basically a time waste, but you can just move around with them and it's not that big of a deal. So it can be useful, but definitely not always. At 19, it's gonna be Colt for me. Colt's super has its uses. It can deal some damage and it can break down walls kind of long range, but it's hard to get all of those to be really that useful. A lot of times with Colt, it's pretty hard to aim his super really accurately. You might get a little bit of damage, but it's never a ton of damage, which you compare to the potential of it. The potential of Colt's super is really high, but for the most part, you're not going to be getting a ton of damage. Even if you get this, like you use the whole super on the safe and heist, it's still not even a ton of damage. It's a decent amount. It's basically 2 Colt shots, which doesn't actually sound like that much, but it's something. It definitely has its uses. I just don't think it's really, really useful. It's never getting a ton of damage and breaking down walls all at the same time, usually, at least not that often. Now, these next 2 supers were sort of hard to rank because I found them like first of all, really different from all the other supers, and they're basically like utility supers, I guess you can say, at least for those brawlers. At 18, it's gonna be Bull, and 17, I'll just do it right now, it's gonna be El Primo. I mean, both of these brawlers, they definitely need their super to be really good, but they're also pretty good without their super as far as their really big health or really big damage at close range. But in Heist, for instance, they definitely need their super to be really useful. In other modes, maybe not quite as much. El Primo Brawl Ball definitely needs it, but you can still be really useful without those supers. I found these kind of hard to rank these supers because they're totally different from the others. They're very useful offensively. You really probably aren't using them defensively unless you're in gem grab and you say have gems and you're going backwards. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be using, well, or say in solo showdown you're trying to stay alive, that could be useful. But I found these kind of hard to rank. I think they're definitely really useful, but I also think these brawlers are definitely good without their super as well. So this is where I'm going to put their supers. At 16, it's going to be Poco. Poco's super heals himself and any teammates he hits with his super. It's definitely useful, but I just didn't find it to have as much impact as I I really wanted in the game. I also find Poco doesn't charge his super that often, which is another reason it's sort of ranked where it is. If he charges super a lot more and he had a ton of supers throughout the game, this would probably be a really useful super, but it doesn't get a ton of heals throughout the game, it feels like, and the heals, it honestly doesn't even feel like a ton of health either, especially if you're like a tank. It's barely a quarter of your health sometimes, so it's definitely somewhat useful for me, but I didn't find it really useful, especially when you compare, say, to the amount of healing a Pam turret can do. It just doesn't feel like it compares. At 15, this might surprise some of you, it's gonna be Spike. Spike's super is definitely useful, but it's when he has his star power that it is insanely useful, and you are always getting value with it for the most part. Without his star power, it's still good, but it's not going to be quite as good for me. It's still going to slow down people, get a little bit of damage, and be a little bit of area control, as well as being able to go over walls. But it's not that much damage, and I just don't find it to be always really useful. It's going to be always somewhat useful for me with Spike, but it's not going to be always really useful. And I think that's the difference between it being ranked a lot higher. It's still going to be a decent super, but it's not going to be amazing. So that's where it is for me. At 14, it's going to be Ricochet. Ricochet, his star power definitely affects how good his super is, because it gets a faster bounce and it does more damage, so that definitely impacts Ricochet. I do really like his super. It can be hard to avoid if you do it with the correct angle, and it can deal a ton of damage if so. Without his star power, not quite as true, but still really good. I found it a little hard to rank though. It doesn't break down walls, just does strictly damage. It's definitely useful. I didn't find it insanely useful. I could agree if you were to rank it a little bit higher, but I don't think I would put it that much higher for Ricochet. 13, it's gonna be Crow. Crow's star power technically affects his super because he poisons people. It makes them deal less damage when he poisons them. But it's not that much of an impact for Crow. Crow, to me, he's this high. He doesn't feel like he has an insanely strong super, but I think the potential of it is crazy. If you land on the safe in heist, you deal so much damage. On top of that, you can actually do a lot of damage just when your original jump, when you first jump in the air, he also does a ton of damage, which a lot of people don't utilize very well, an underrated part of Crow's super. He can be really potentially dangerous, and honestly, the best part of Crow, besides his poison, it's going to be his super. You'd have to pick one of the two, either his poison or his super. Both of them are basically the main useful parts of playing Crow at all, and his super is a really big part of that. Jumping on people who are medium to low health, getting really easy kills, just targeting them from a long distance too. Definitely a far super, or if you really need to, you can jump away as well. So there's a lot of uses for Crow's super, and it definitely has the potential to be really good for me. At 12, it's going to be Daryl. Now, I found this one pretty difficult to rank, because if you're thinking about Daryl's super, without his super, Daryl is almost useless. But at the same time, without his star power, his super is not nearly as good. It's a really important star power for Daryl to really have an effective super, because he just takes so much more damage without it, and he doesn't deal a ton of damage. So this was an interesting one for me. It's at a decent rank, I feel like, but without his star power, I found it harder for me to rank it that much higher. Still really important for Daryl, but it's not nearly as strong without his star power. And actually, this next brawler is going to be a really similar case. At 11, it's going to be Jessie. Jessie's turret is definitely really good, but again, without her star power, it's not nearly as good. Her star power is very useful for keeping that turret alive and making that super that much more annoying to deal with and that much harder to deal with. Without her star power, it's not nearly the same usefulness of her super. It's still useful, it's still good, but it's not going to be nearly the same. At 10, it's going to be Nita. Now, Nita's star power does definitely help out her bear with some healing for the bear or for Nita herself, but I don't find Nita's star power to be that amazing of a star power anyway, so it's not going to negatively impact Nita that much. Her bear is definitely really useful. When you get it, it has a really big impact, I feel like, every time, unless you're like throwing it into a bull or some other brawler that just destroys brawlers at point blank, like a Leon maybe. Unless you're doing that, Nita's bear is really useful. Pushes people back, gets you map control, and it can deal damage. Has a lot of health, deals some damage, and it follows people, most importantly, which really puts on the pressure, really pushing them back. So I definitely really like Nita's bear. At 9, it's gonna be Brock. Now, Brock's super is not crazy strong for me, but it's useful in a lot of different ways. It covers a really wide area, can hit multiple people, easily getting you 1, maybe 2, or 3 shots if you have a good super every single time. It can be a little bit difficult to aim, which makes it a little bit high skill cap, but it also has a lot of uses. It can break down walls, it goes over walls, which makes it really threatening. You're able to use it in any situation. It has a pretty good range on it as well, so there's a lot of uses. Breaks walls, hits multiple people, does good amount of damage, and goes over walls. So Brock's super to me really useful in every single game, but it's going to be pretty well ranked for me. At 8, it's going to be Dynamite. Dynamite super to me is really useful. It can hit multiple people, throws over walls, but the biggest thing for Dynamite and it being ranked this high is it charges so quickly. He can get so many supers throughout a game, and if you hit with his super, he can get it back so quickly. If you hit 2 people, he automatically gets it back, which is insane. You can chain supers with Dynamite, and it's not even that implausible. It can definitely happen in multiple games. Dynamite super is a really strong force. It can really, it also knocks back people really far, interrupts them, puts them in a completely different situation, makes it really difficult for them to counteract it. You do have to manually aim his super for maximum effectiveness, which is a little bit of a skill cap, but it's not that hard to aim, so it's definitely going to be a really good super. At 7, it's going to be Shelly. Now, Shelly's star power does help her super a little bit, but I don't think her star power is that amazing anyways. Definitely decent, but it's her super itself that really makes Shelly the threat that she is. She doesn't have more health than tanks. She doesn't deal more damage than tanks with her normal attacks. It's her super that completely destroys tanks and gives them no chance whatsoever. It feels like they maybe get 1 or 2 shots in, but they just get completely wrecked. If you walk into a Shelly in the bush, bye, bye, bye. You are gone. So Shelly's super definitely really useful against any close range brawler. Not very useful versus any long range brawler. But part of the reason I really like Shelly's super is if you do interact with any of those close range brawlers, you get her super back really quickly, which makes it that much more useful. So it can have a really big impact, especially in, like, say, Brawl Ball. It can not only knock people really good defensively, but also breaks down walls. So it's really useful in that situation. Also in Heist as a tank counter, or anywhere else just as a tank counter, Shelly's super is the reason why. At 6, it's going to be Barley. Now, Barley is this high for me because of just the total utility of Barley's super. I feel like you can always get a really useful Barley super pretty much every single time. You can use that point blank on the safe heist and get it down over 50% with 1 super, which is insane. So it can be really good damage in close range. And you can also do it with a wide spread, say in gem grab, pushing the enemy back. It covers such a wide spread, putting so much pressure on the enemy, able to hit multiple people, still deal decent damage. Doesn't take too long to charge the super up. It can just be useful in so many different situations for me, and it can go over walls, it can have a really long range, push people back, really good for map control. I think lower trophy players might underrate the effectiveness of map control in so many different situations, but with Barley, he is the best at it, especially because of his super. But don't underrate Barley with the damage potential at close range as well, even though he's normally not a close range brawler. It just puts Barley in so many good situations. I got it rated high. At 5, it's gonna be Penny. Penny's cannon, I honestly feel like this one maybe speaks for itself, but it's probably easily the best part of Penny. Technically, Penny's star power affects her cannon, but it's the worst star power in the game for me, and it's not even close. So not much of a factor. Penny's cannon is amazing. Incredibly long range, 12 tiles. It makes it so hard to deal with that cannon, because how are you supposed to get close to it? If you put it in a decent spot with Penny, it's going to be really difficult to kill that cannon, and it'll just charge up. You can get another cannon not that hard with Penny. So I definitely think this is one of the best supers in the game. It's one of the main reasons Penny is any good. Her shot is okay, but her health is really low. Kind of slow reload speed. Doesn't deal that much damage per shot. It's her cannon that makes Penny be really strong. At 4, it's going to be Leon. Now, Leon's star power definitely affects how useful his super is. But imagine Leon without his super. He's still, like, useful, right? If he's hiding in the grass and you don't know where he is, you're just surprised by him. But say it's a non-grassy map. Right now, Leon is playing on a lot of non-grassy maps, and it's because of his super. Yeah, his star power makes it more useful, but it's still an insanely strong super. Last 10 seconds, and he goes invisible. Like, what other super does anything similar? None, of course. But it just makes him Leon. He makes him the chameleon that he is, it makes him so much more useful. It's hard to imagine Leon without his super, and I think it would be not nearly as effective. So yeah, it's a good super. At 3, it's gonna be Pam. Look, I feel like Pam's turret is the best turret in the game. So much usefulness. You can have so much potential healing. It just gives you complete control. First of all, Pam is a really high health brawler, but imagine being able to heal like 400 to 500 health a second. It's like, what? It's insane. That, and you can also apply to her teammates as well. Just the potential usefulness of Pam's super is so good. It's gonna be one of the best supers for me. All right, now these last two I found a little bit difficult to rank which one was better, but I think you'll agree with me. At number 2, it's gonna be Tara. Tara's super is really good. There's almost no super in the game that's better at getting kills than Tara. Sure, Leon's really good at it, and this next brawler is as well, but Tara's super can pull in multiple people, and it has a wide range, and it's just insanely hard to stop any good Tara super. There's not much you can do if a Tara supers you, has all her shots, and let alone if there's any of her teammates there to help out, like, you're sorry buddy, you're done. Game over. You can respawn, try again later, and that's about it. Tara's super insanely. Yes, her star power does make it a little bit better. I'm not gonna disagree with that, but even without her star power, it's still gonna be insanely strong for me. At number 1, though, this brawler also has an insanely strong super. It's gonna be Frank. Yeah, I know, Frank's super, what are you gonna do? Yeah, definitely the big weakness with Frank's super is how long it takes. But the reason it's gonna be ranked over Tara's for me is gonna be it only takes 3 shots for Frank to charge his super. There's so many times where you can hit multiple people with Frank's super and then you're just gonna get it back right there. He's so good at getting kills and it's such a threatening super. Frank has a super, you're like, I don't even wanna be in range of you and your super, dude. Like, go away. Unless you have something that can cancel his super, like a Shelly super or another Tara super, you really don't want to be within range of Frank if he has his super. It's insanely strong and is very hard to stop. Even though it does have a long charge time to swing it down, it's still really useful. Breaks down walls, does a decent amount of damage, and it just completely gets a lot of kills. So Frank, best super in the game. Want to see how brawlers rank in other game modes or just overall? Make sure to check out my playlist right over there, giving you exactly that. It's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you later.